Biology students, I'm so sorry. I forgot to tell you that I was going to be gone today in class on Tuesday because I am serving with my light group at Nazareth House. And so I thought that we would kind of flip-flop the lesson plan for Thursday and just have you guys do it in class Tuesday, and then we can all finish watching the movie together on Thursday. And so we're going to move to the next chapter, which looks at deviance and social control. So if you think about the movie, Katie is the main character, and she's based off of the real-life girl named Jeannie. Katie is very deviant, meaning that she is consistently violating social norms. The difference between her deviant behavior and the deviant behavior we're going to be focusing on in this next unit is that Katie's deviant behavior was because she was never taught the social norms, whereas most deviance that we see in society is when people knowingly or intentionally deviate or violate social norms. And we're going to look at ways that society tries to encourage conformity of social norms or to social norms through social control. So something I want you to think about is what behavior was considered deviant when your, or hopefully you still see me a little bit in your generation, our parents were in high school, that is no longer considered a departure from societal norms. So what is now more commonly accepted than was when our parents were in high school? So what would have been considered deviant that now we think, oh, that's fine, everybody does that. Some of the responses that I got from my parents and older people whom I've spoke with included having tattoos. During the 1950s and 60s, if you look at our country's social history, there were certain groups of people who definitely got tattoos more than all others in our country. For example, military people. It was pretty common for men who were serving the military to get tattoos. Also, there were some biker gangs where it would be more fitting or commonly practiced to get tattoos. Now we see celebrities, we see men, women, old, young, it really doesn't matter, characteristics. Tattoos are very popular. Same with body piercings. Just simply a girl getting a hole in each ear pierced was considered to be sort of a novel or a new innovative practice, whereas now body piercings don't just stop at the ears. They go to almost any crevice of the body that you can imagine. Sagging. So sagging, personally, I think is so strange. But back in the day, air quotes, sagging was considered to be a deviant act. Why on earth would a young man be showing his underwear, his boxers, to public? And then it became kind of like a fashion trend, and it became the social norm. So now we almost look at like, why does that teenage boy look so funny? Oh, it's because his pants are up above his waist, and he's not slouching like where his pants sit. Also, mohawks. I remember talking to my dad, and he said the only boys who had mohawks when he was in high school were definitely sort of like the rebellious punk rock group. No one else had mohawk. And I remember a couple years ago at Cathedral, the entire football team went through kind of like this faux hawk craze. And now it's not super earth-shattering when we see guys who have mohawk hairstyles. Very baggy clothing, like basketball shorts. If you go back and look at any archived footage of basketball games, even in the 80s, the 1980s, the basketball shorts were very tight, very fitted, and very short. And that was what everyone did. And I remember it was the University of Michigan's men's basketball team. They earned the nickname the Fab Five because they had 5 freshmen who became their starting lineup. They were the first program to go on national TV and really introduce baggy basketball clothes. I call it baggy. It's totally what you would see if you were to watch any high school, college, or NBA game right now. So baggy clothing is definitely a newer social norm. People walking around in spandex. This was actually one that I added myself. I noticed the first couple years where I was working at Cathedral that volleyball players or athletes, a lot of females, after school was out, they would just kind of like walk around in their spandex running shoes and a tank top or a shirt. And I remember when I was in high school, even the volleyball players who played games in spandex, once practice was over, their game was over, they would put sweatpants or they would put a bigger pair of shorts, boxer shorts, whatever, over their spandex because it was just sort of considered you just did not walk around in your spandex. And that's definitely more accepted now. Cohabitation or living with someone before marriage is much more of a social norm now than it used to be. And then homosexuality from almost any angle is much more recognized and accepted than it was back in the day. So if you can brainstorm any other ways in which behavior used to be considered deviant and now is accepted, I would love for you guys to share those ideas with me in class on Thursday. Okay, I found a quote that sort of speaks to the idea that deviance doesn't necessarily mean dangerous or negative or harmful. It simply means violating social norms. Oh, sorry, I kind of had a coughing attack, so I had to just stop the video for a second. But deviance means not doing what the majority does or doing what the majority does not, going against the grain. And so I would ask you, how then does this make deviance tough to define? What some people might argue is completely acceptable and following social norms, other people might see differently. And depending on who is in the majority and who is sort of evaluating the behavior, you're going to get a different definition of deviance. So for example, this man posted up here on this stoplight is what he's doing deviant. If you were to look up in a local statute or in a book of all the penal codes and rules, you're going to find that this man is in fact trespassing. But other people might say, hey, I love to climb up on stoplights, so he is not deviant because everybody does that. And so because social norms are constantly changing and being redefined, then it's going to be difficult to define deviance. Picking your nose. Do the majority of people pick their nose? Or do few people pick their nose, and therefore those who do, they are being deviant? Again, depending on who you ask and who's going to look at a situation, the definition of deviance is going to change because the social norm might be viewed differently. So what is deviance? Deviance, violating social norm. Be sure that you add this as a term in your glossary. It must be defined by a consensus or by the majority, which is why it changes. Again, as trends and fads and norms evolve, thus deviance is also going to evolve. There is positive and negative deviance, and so be sure that you add these two terms to your glossary as well. Positive deviance does not necessarily mean good or beneficial. Rather, it means behavior that over-conforms to social expectations. Again, does not mean good. And the little example, the bullet point that I put right here, is an anorexic teenager. So the social norm that most people would agree upon, and most people, whether we're looking at people at Cathedral Catholic High School, Southern California, the United States, most people are going to say that the social norm is for a man or a woman to be healthy, to be fit, to be healthy, to be of a healthy weight. And so what happens if someone takes that norm of being a healthy weight and over-conforms, like goes past the social norm into an area where they no longer are part of the majority? Anorexia is an example of this. Someone who's anorexic doesn't just stop at a healthy body weight. He or she continues to work to a lower body weight, and so they are overachieving the social norms. And whenever you're overdoing it, that is when we see positive deviance. Another example would be our school dress code. Let's say a student came to school in dress-up day attire every single day. That student would be over-conforming, and so he would be exercising positive deviance because he would be doing something different than the group, but he would not just be meeting our school's dress code, he would be dressing so nice. Positive deviance. Negative deviance is the most common, and this is behavior that underconforms to accepted norm. So if we use a counterexample to our anorexic teenager, negative deviance would be someone who is very obese. So most people are not going to be extremely obese, and so they are no longer part of the majority. And failing to even meet the standard of having a healthy body weight shows that it is underconforming to the accepted norms. Okay, deviance and addiction, we're going to kind of wait till I get back to class, so I apologize if that just popped up, and I'm going to skip it. So what are ways in which society is encouraged to follow social norms? We do this through social control, and that we're all built with an internal social control, and this lies within the individual, otherwise known as your conscience. So the angel If you think back to Freud's id, ego, superego, the superego aspect of our personality, the part of our personality that is selfless and constantly thinking about helping and protecting society. And then we have forms of external social controls. And this is based on social sanctions, which should sound familiar. And these are rewards or punishments that encourage conformity to social norms. We have positive and negative sanctions. And if I ask you on Thursday to provide examples of positive and negative sanctions, you definitely should be able to do that. Okay, so just to review real quick as to what we've discussed, what term do sociologists use for behavior that significantly violates societal or group norms? Deviance. You guys are so smart. Explain why it is sometimes difficult to identify deviance. Think about it. Should be examples like social norms are changing, therefore deviance is changing. It has to be agreed upon by a consensus or majority, and so depending on who you ask, you're going to get a different perspective. And what is the purpose of a social sanction? The purpose of a social sanction is to encourage people to follow norms or discourage people from deviating against social norms.